It said yesterday on our show, talking with some skepticism as it relates to the hype surrounding Trey Lance.
As impressive as Trey Lance's highlights are something about those highlights give me some pause, because I look at the end zone and it says Penguins. Like, he's playing against Youngstown State. Like, let's relax. Let's calm it down a little bit. He's balling against Penguins. It's hard for me to get too excited about that tape.
Well, that's what he said. Meanwhile, Dan Orlovsky on Twitter yesterday, in talking about Lance, tweeted, "You don't draft on production, you draft on projection." So a couple of different ways to look at this very intriguing prospect. Let's look at him a little more closely, Field and Mike T. And Dan, I'll start with you. It's usually Ryan Clark I ask to do this, but explain that tweet.
Well, Greeny, quarterback production is a completely dependent result, especially in college football. Okay, like, what was your play caller like? How did your receivers play? How good was the offensive line? Like, I know a lot. I've seen a lot of quarterbacks in college football that at the end of the day, they played a top 10 defense and they threw for 380 yards and 70% completion percentage. So their production was incredible. Well, 8 of those throws were screens behind the line of scrimmage that receivers took into 120 yards after the catch, right? So the quarterback production thing is such an overblown thing. I would say this, everybody at home, go on your computer right now and type in all-time college passing leaders. You're not going to find a name until you get to like 20 that's had a really good NFL career. Do it with touchdowns. You won't find a name till like 30 that's had a good NFL career. Projection is completely individualized. What are you as a player? What is your skill set and your traits and your talents? What are they now, and what could they potentially be in 5 years? I don't really care what you did versus a certain team. Projection over production.
That's a really fascinating one, and I haven't heard it framed with those specific words, but it really is a good way to look at it. Mike T, is one who has made these picks. Projection versus production. How do you see it?
There is a time and place for projection, but not what San Francisco just did, trading 2 first-round picks and a third. One of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was drafting Vernon Golston with the 6th pick. It was a projection. He played with his hand down. We were transitioning to 3-4. It was a bad decision with a bad process. We should have done that in the 2nd or 3rd round. You could live to fight another day. I can't imagine that Kyle Shanahan would trade up 2 1s and a third not to know who they're going to take. And when you see them flying around the country, going to Ohio State last week with Justin Fields, being in North Dakota yesterday, what that says to me, and what I am hearing around the league, is they are not unanimous in who they want to pick, meaning John Lynch, Adam Peters, and Kyle Shanahan. And at the Jets, we had a sign in our draft room: "In God we trust, for everyone else we need data." And I think what they're doing is they're checking those last box in terms of being very thorough.
I kind of like that. All right, so Yates, and you sit there and you are talking to absolutely everybody. Give me the way you see it, because we're done now. I mean, the process, for the most part, is done. Fields had a second pro day. Lance had a second pro day. Mac Jones had 2 pro days. Where are we right now, 9 days from the draft, as far as where these quarterbacks should be expecting to go?
Yeah, so Greeny, everybody has an opinion on every other team during the pre-draft process, right? So you want to know about what the 49ers' plans are? You can ask 31 other teams, because the 49ers, lips sealed. Everybody else, they've got a thought. And I will just say this: despite the fact that there's been some suggestions recently and some visits by the 49ers to both Justin Fields and Trey Lance's second pro days, that almost every person that I talk to around the NFL believes the 49ers are still going to be taking Mac Jones 3rd overall. And I don't know if this is because we've had too much time to think about the pick, that we've talked ourselves into changing our minds, but I do believe that Mac Jones remains the favorite for the 49ers. And while Trey Lance and Justin Fields may not go number 3, I still think the 4 for those 2 quarterbacks is pick 9. Whether that's the Broncos or somebody moving up, I don't think any of these 5 quarterbacks slides out of the top 10.
All right, so that again would be the fastest that we've ever seen it happen. If 4 of them go off the board with the first 4 picks, that would be unprecedented. So no one is falling in these scenarios. So we have to be very careful with how we frame this. But to be the 5th quarterback in a 5-quarterback draft is not something that these guys, I think, would be excited about. One way or another, we are just getting rolling. As we continue, you know what the Cowboys need, right? They need help on defense. But could they shock everyone and draft another playmaker? Stephen Jones has addressed it. He answers that question. You'll hear it coming up next. Plus, Bill Belichick is the king of the and more. We're 9 days away from the NFL draft. And look who is here. Field Yates, who I believe is running for mayor of Vail, Colorado. Mike Tannenbaum, who is going to trade up for a quarterback by the end of today's program. And Dan Orlovsky is going to hit a few drives straight down the middle of the fairway. They're on their way, but we begin with the performance of the night. Oh, Steph Curry has been on fire, and it would continue last night in Philly, being guarded by his brother, closing seconds of the first, knocking down a three. That's a sign of things to come. Steph had 29 through three. And then in the fourth quarter, he just took over. Watch Steph Curry around the screen. That's going to be a theme. That's his 6th 3. That would tie the game at 86. Warriors down 2 now. Curry again using the screen. That's his 7th 3 of the night. Warriors up by 1. Later, the lead is 1. It's Steph again. It's the same play around the screen. His brother can't get there. That's 8 threes. Warriors pulling away. 2 minutes left. Warriors by 6. You're not going to believe it. It's Steph again. That's his 9th. Warriors up by 9. And then just for good measure, how about breaking it into double digits? Just over a minute to go. The lead is 6. That's his 10th 3 of the night. 49 points for Steph Curry. His 11th straight game with at least 30. You can't spell Steph without MVP.
This streak, I'm obviously aware, but it's you don't put too much pressure on yourself. You just play basketball. I've just settled into just having fun, kind of letting the game come to you, and I'm having a blast out there just playing basketball, and it's obviously working.
You guys ask me after every game what I think of Steph and his performance, and it's whatever I said last game, just use that. It's just utter amazement at this guy's skill level, heart, mind, focus. It's just amazing to watch.
Well, he's a 2-time MVP, but he's never played better than he's playing right now. Since last Monday, Steph has 4 games with 10 threes. That stretch alone would give him the 3rd most such games all time. That's since last Monday. He's also the first player ever to average 40 points, 50% from the floor, 40% on threes, and 90% from the line over an 11-game stretch. And after the explosion last night, he has overtaken Bradley Beal for the scoring title this season. He's now averaging 31.4 points a game. He has also moved up his odds in the MVP running. This was last night during the game. Caesars Sportsbook by William Hill moved his odds from 50-1 to 20-1 as a result of last night's game alone. And so here is Tim Legler and Legs. Now, we were talking before the show came on about just what this stretch has meant for the sport, for the league at a time when they so desperately need it. What do you think about the idea that Steph has entered the MVP conversation?
Oh, yeah, he should have been in it all along, but I think what he's doing right now, obviously, has thrust him into the conversation because they're also winning games. And in the NBA, it's a little bit different. You know, it's not like baseball where you can win an MVP in a last-place team. I believe A-Rod did that. It doesn't work that way in the NBA, typically. You've got to have a team that's winning, a team that's a solid playoff team, and they're starting to win again, and he's doing it at the right time. All this momentum as we head down the stretch. This is a guy now that at 33 years old is giving us something that we never thought we'd see, which is him at his very best. Imagine capturing for a moment in time an all-time great when he's at his absolute best. It's hard to find that sometimes and remember what that is for all-time greats. We're seeing it right before our eyes. So absolutely, he belongs in the conversation. And more importantly for me, Greeny, what you just said, he may have salvaged the NBA regular season because it has been a very difficult stretch with all of these guys missing games, marquee matchups that don't really come to fruition. He has now created so much interest with what he is doing and so much electricity that he is really single-handedly saving the regular season for the NBA and giving us a great prelude for what the playoffs could look like.
I agree completely. He plays with such a joy that it is contagious and delightful to watch. Again, he has 6 games with at least 10 threes this season. No other player has more than 5 in their career. So what Steph is doing is ridiculous. But you brought up initially the idea of this team not being in the play. Right now, they're not even assured of being in the playoffs. They would be in that play-in situation. What do they look like to you right now as far as a team that could do some damage if they get in the playoffs?
Well, look, they're still obviously a team that's shorthanded, and that's going to be tough. Their rotation isn't very deep. But when you have a guy this high that does this kind of destruction to what you want to do defensively and totally redefines how far out you have to extend your defense and the number of bases you need to cover and how easy that makes the game for other people. When you have a guy like this at his absolute best, Greeny, would you want to play him in a one-game situation in a play-in? I certainly wouldn't. And then even if they're able to escape that, you look at a team like Phoenix, you look at a team like Utah, the two teams at the top of the Western Conference. You want to play Steph Curry in a best of 7 when he's coming in, playing his absolute best basketball of his entire life? It's a dangerous proposition. What this guy is doing right now to defenses, it's almost impossible to ask that much of your bigs to be that far out on the floor that often to contain this guy. And that's what he is doing right now. And he's certainly making those early games, the play-in games certainly, and then maybe even a best of 7 with a team like Utah or Phoenix in the first round. Much more interesting than we ever thought it would have been.
No question. Legs, outstanding to see you. Thank you. Stay close by. We'll do more with you a little later as Steph is knocking down all the trays. And speaking of trays, let's get to Trey Lance. He had his second pro day yesterday, and among those in attendance, and this is important, were the 49ers' John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. They have the number 3 pick in the draft. I want you to hear something that Dominique Foxworth said yesterday on our show, talking with some